Hey everyone, so with the likely nomination of Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, there's a pretty big debate amongst progressives as to whether or not to stay in the Democratic Party and try to change it from within, or to just kind of just have this mass exodus and then form our own like third party that will eventually overtake the Democratic Party. And David Pakman answers this question with what I feel like is a pretty appropriate example. So let's take a look at the video and then we'll come back and we'll kind of talk about his example.
Do you believe is the future of the progressive movement in the Democratic Party, or is the future of American progressivism outside of the Democratic Party? So there's a philosophical debate here. There's an ideological debate to be had about, will the Democratic Party allow itself to become a truly progressive party, or will it not allow that, meaning that if progressives want a real foothold in the United States, they will have to work outside the Democratic Party as third party candidates or whatever else the case may be? Beautiful conversation. I love it. Completely irrelevant if campaign finance is not reformed. And arguably, if we don't actually change our system of elections away from a first past the post winner take all system. I think that if you look at the Tea Party movement of 2010, if the Tea Party movement had decided to work exclusively outside of the Republican Party, instead of just having Tea Partiers run as Republicans, had the Tea Party succeeded at taking seats, it actually would have weakened the Republican Party, and by its by the inverse, it would have strengthened the Democratic Party. Why is that? If the Tea Party candidates were not running as Republicans, they would have been running against Republicans. They would have disproportionately taken votes from Republicans. They would have played spoilers for Republicans. And they likely wouldn't have won as many seats either, right? So you would have had some cases where Republican seats would have been lost to Tea Party seats as third partiers, and that would have weakened the Republican Party. You also would have had seats that a Tea Partier running inside the Republican Party could have won, but would not have, because Republican money would have poured into the Republican candidate and not the Tea Party candidate. So because campaign finance is what it is, and because we have a voting system that is what we have, the Tea Party won a bunch of seats in 2010 in the midterms because they ran as Republicans. At the local level, some didn't, but nationally they ran as Republicans. Eventually, the Tea Party became integrated into the Republican Party, and the Republican Party overall was moved towards the Tea Party. This was a massive win for the Tea Party. You don't really hear much about the Tea Party anymore. It's just part of the Republican Party at this point in time. That's an example of a success.
All right, and so I think that David Pakman is really, really good in bringing up this example. I tend to disagree with David Pakman slightly on most issues. He is obviously a progressive, but he's like, of all of like the progressive YouTubers, he's like one of the more moderate progressive YouTubers. Like he's not a moderate by any means, but like he's a little too compromising in his position sometimes, in my opinion. I don't watch a lot of David Pakman, but that's kind of the feel I get from him. But I think he's spot on with the Tea Party comparison, because he's so right. And this was kind of the mentality with Justice Democrats. I mean, that was Kyle Kalinske and JQ were the two founders of Justice Democrats, or two co-founders. And then Kyle Kalinske talks about how the plan was a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. And now he's not talking about literally hostile, but he's talking about a very aggressive takeover from within of the Democratic Party with the hopes of just overall changing the party. And I think that this is the most effective strategy short term, just because, like what David Pakman's saying, if you do have this like massive exodus of the Democratic Party, there's going to be a long time where Republicans are just going to dominate because Democrats and progressives will be splitting the vote. And so I do think that the taking over the Democratic Party is the right move. But I think that we have to remember kind of what our goals are with this, and we can't get complacent. And so people love to talk about how far the Democratic Party has come, especially when you have people like Pete Buttigieg, who's considered like a moderate, but he's advocating for a public option, and he's advocating for a lot of student debt relief, not all student debt relief, but he's advocating for a lot of it. He's pretty good on immigration, or at least he says he's pretty good on immigration. And so like things like that, it's like, wow, we've really pulled the Democratic Party really far. Like, but like that's fine. but we can't get complacent. Like, that's not good enough. Like, we can't just say, well, we pulled it really far, so I guess the job's done. It's like, no, 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 no. We have to keep fighting. And one of the reasons this becomes successful is if Democratic politicians feel like their only option is to move to the left if they want our votes. Like, if they want the votes of progressives, they need to earn them, essentially. They need to advocate for positions that progressives care about. And so you are seeing the successes of this, where people are like, "Dang, Bernie Sanders is getting a lot of votes. He's got a strong movement. He's got a lot of volunteers. He's got a lot of people knocking doors for him. I'm gonna have to change what I'm asking for a little bit. I'm gonna have to change what I'm advocating for. I might not be able to take all this money from corporations. Elizabeth Warren started off pretty good when it came to not taking corporate money. By the end of her campaign, she was taking super PAC money, but I think that a large reason why she wasn't is because of Bernie Sanders. And she's like, if I want to fulfill this like left lane of the Democratic Party, if I want to try and take this like progressive slot from Bernie, which I feel like is what she was angling to do at the beginning, she's like, I can't be taking corporate money. She's like, it just won't work. I can't have a super PAC. Towards the end, like I said, she really started to fizzle out, and so she compromised on a lot of what she said that she believed. But that's a story for another day. But Elizabeth Warren is a good example of like pulling someone who was able to be pulled, pulling her to the left at least for a short time, and then like seeing the ramifications of that. And then Pete Buttigieg is another good example, just because he's a moderate, but like he's only a moderate because we've pulled the party so far to the left, which is good, but we can't stop there. And the other thing I think that we should really stress in terms of messaging is like not letting people we need to dictate who's a Democrat. Like, we really need to change the conversation. Like, with people like Nancy Pelosi, we should say she's not really a Democrat. Like, she's not an actual Democrat. She's not fighting for Medicare for all. She doesn't fight for living wage. She doesn't fight for free college. She doesn't fight for a Green New Deal. She's not really a Democrat. What's she stand for? She takes corporate money. That's not what a Democrat does. And like, obviously there's a lot of Democrats that don't do those things, but we change the narrative over what people believe a Democrat is. You know what I mean? We adjust people's perceptions of that. If we say it over and over again, instead of saying that like, oh, she's like this corporate Democrat, we just say that she's just not a Democrat. That's how we take over the party in terms of narrative. Is we set this, people like Steve Manchin. I mean, not a Democrat, or I'm sorry, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, not a Democrat. These really really conservative Democrats. We should stop calling them Democrats. Be like, you're not really a Democrat. And that's the same with Joe Biden, honestly. We should say Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee because he's not actually a Democrat. They tried to do it with Bernie Sanders. It wasn't successful. I mean, Bernie Sanders did very, very well, even though, like, he came in as an independent. And so I think that we need to try and use that same, like, narrative that more moderate Democrats were trying to put towards progressives and trying to say, oh, you guys aren't really Democrats, so you guys shouldn't be Democrats. But then when their candidate wins, they're like, oh, if you don't vote for our candidate, then you're helping Donald Trump. And so like that was super hypocritical. But we just need to use that same messaging where it's like, no. You guys aren't the Democrats. We are the actual Democratic Party. We are the actual people fighting for the people. We are what the Democratic Party actually stands for. These people, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're not real Democrats. And so I think that is super important. I think it's super important that we aren't compromising. And this is like one of the tough things that people don't like to acknowledge. But to a certain point, we have to show, well, if we don't think these people are Democrats, then we have to show our ability not to vote for them. We have to show the ability to, election day comes, and if this person isn't with your values, then you can't vote for them. Especially if you do not live in a swing state come 2020, please do not vote for Joe Biden. Please do not vote for him. It is so important that we show that we have this power as progressives, and we show that we are willing to not vote for people, because that's the thing. The Democratic Party has taken the progressive vote for granted for so long, because progressives, they feel like progressives have nowhere else to go. And so if progressives can show that they are unwilling to vote for someone like Joe Biden, which shouldn't be very hard. You can think of any number of reasons not to vote for Joe Biden. If you live in a swing state, I still think, you do have to take into account damage control. And I think that Joe Biden is 100% less than Donald Trump. He would do less damage. I think he would do a lot of damage. I think he would do less damage. If you don't think that, if your morals don't allow you to vote for potentially a rapist or a war criminal, that's a hard sell for me to argue against you on that. But I will just say Donald Trump is worse, is all I would say on that. But I definitely, if you don't live in a swing state, don't vote for Joe Biden. We need to show that there is a movement. We have no more love for people like Joe Biden. We have no more love for people like Nancy Pelosi. No more love for people like Chuck Schumer. Love for him as a person, not as our politicians. And so I think that that's really important. I think that the Tea Party is the roadmap. I mean, obviously not in like ideology, but in terms of like what they were able to do, how they were able to just completely change the Republican Party to, like what David Pakman said, you don't talk about the Tea Party anymore because it just became Republicans. Republicans just became the Tea Party, and that is what we need to do with Justice Democrats. And I think we're succeeding at it. You know, it would have been big if we had Bernie Sanders win, but I mean, overall, in terms of messaging, in terms of ideological shift, I think that progressives are seeing huge gains, and I think we're going to see even more in the years to come. I'm really excited about it. But if you guys disagree with anything I said in this video, please leave a comment down below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.